Hello, friends. We are interested in the geography of our views, so please like and write in the comments from which city are you watching us, and were there loud stories of betrayal in your city? Perhaps the next story about betrayal will be from your city, and we start. A warm July evening softly enveloped the Wilsons' suburban home, where the family's annual party was in full swing. The sun was setting, filling the yard with golden pink light, and a light wind stirred the leaves of the old maple tree. The laughter of the guests, the clinking of glasses, the smell of fried meat from the grill, and the sounds of old jazz from the speakers created the perfect picture of family comfort. It was the day when relatives gathered together, leaving worries behind and enjoying the moment. The spotlight, as every year, was on Kevin and Lauren, a couple everyone considered to be the epitome of perfection. Kevin, tall, with broad shoulders and a touch of gray in his dark hair, exuded confidence. His blue eyes shone with good nature, and his smile, the same one that once captivated Lauren, seemed to be his calling card. He stood at the grill, deftly flipping steaks, and joked with Uncle Fred, who, as usual, tried to teach him proper cooking. "Kevin, son, you're burning meat." Fred was loudly indignant, waving a beer bottle. "It should be juicy and not like coal." "Uncle Fred, if I do as you say, we'll be chewing raw beef," Kevin joked, and the crowd around them burst into laughter. Lauren stood a little further away, with a glass of white wine in her hand, watching her husband with a slight smile. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and her white dress with a floral pattern emphasized her grace. She looked perfect, beautiful, confident, always ready to support Kevin with a witty remark. 9 years of marriage, 2 children, a house in the suburbs, their life seemed ideal, and their relatives never tired of calling them the American dream. "Lauren, how can you tolerate this stubborn guy?" Aunt Marge, a plump woman with bright red hair, teased, nodding at Kevin. "My Bill always argues with me, but yours is just an angel." Lauren laughed, her voice ringing like a bell. "Marge, we have our own secrets. Sometimes I just make him feel like a hero, and everyone is happy." "Good girl," Marge winked, taking a sip of her cocktail. "Keep him in check, but don't overextend him." Lauren nodded, smiling, but there was a shadow in her eyes, fleeting, barely perceptible. Nobody noticed. Nobody but Kevin. He looked at his wife across the yard, holding a spatula in his hand. She was beautiful, as always, but something in her posture, in the way she clutched her glass, betrayed tension. Kevin knew how to read Lauren. Over the years of marriage, he had learned to notice how she frowned when she was worried, or pursed her lips to hide her irritation. Something was wrong today, and this feeling was bothering him. "Kev, the meat is burning," someone shouted, jerking him out of his thoughts. Kevin perked up, flipped the steaks, and caused another burst of laughter. "Lauren, your hero is sleeping on the move today," Marge said, and everyone laughed again. Lauren smiled, but Kevin noticed that the smile didn't reach her eyes. She took a sip of wine and turned away as if something had caught her attention. Kevin followed her gaze and froze. Derek, his half-brother, stood at the snack table. Derek was Kevin's father's son from his first marriage. Slim, with dark, tousled hair and sharp features, he always seemed like an outsider at family gatherings. His brown eyes looked cold and penetrating, and his rare smiles never seemed sincere. Derek came to the parties out of a sense of duty, preferring to stay away. He lived in the city, worked in it, led a secluded lifestyle, the complete opposite of Kevin. Their relationship was never warm. Two different characters, too little in common. But there was something strange about Derek today. He stood leaning on the table, a bottle of beer in his hand, and looked at Lauren. Kevin felt a pang of anxiety. This look was more than just curious. There was something deep, almost predatory, about him. Derek didn't take his eyes off Lauren, even when she turned away. His lips trembled slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but restrained himself. And then he noticed Kevin. Their gazes crossed. Derek nodded briefly, as if to say hello, and turned away, pretending to listen to Cousin Mike. But Kevin knew it was a mask. Something was happening, and he couldn't figure out what it was. The party went on as usual. Children ran around the yard, adults discussed news and work. Kevin tried to focus on the grill, but his thoughts went back to Lauren and Derek. He secretly watched his wife. She moved from guest to guest, laughed, and looked perfect. But every time her gaze fell on Derek, she seemed to freeze, barely noticeable, but Kevin felt it. "Hey, Kev, are you okay?" asked his father, clapping him on the shoulder. Harry Wilson, a strong, bearded man with a loud voice, always noticed his son's mood. "You look like you saw a ghost." "Yes, Dad, everything is fine," Kevin lied, putting on a smile. "I was just thinking." "About what? About steaks?" Harry winked. "Relax, son. It's a holiday." Kevin nodded, but couldn't relax. He looked back at Lauren. She helped her mother lay out the salads and seemed calm. But then Derek came up. He said something that Kevin couldn't hear because of the noise, and Lauren answered without looking up. Derek grinned, but it was not a friendly smile, but something sharp, almost defiant. Lauren tensed, her fingers gripping the edge of the plate a little tighter. What's between them? Kevin tried to find an explanation. Derek was his brother, but he and Lauren rarely saw each other. Maybe an old conflict, or something he didn't know about. The sun had set, and the yard was illuminated by garlands. The music became louder, and the guests began to dance. Kevin finished the grill and walked over to Lauren. "Mrs. Wilson, shall we dance?" he asked, holding out his hand. She looked at him, and for a moment he thought she was hesitating. But then she smiled and took his hand. "Of course, Mr. Wilson," she replied, and they walked out onto the landing. They danced to a slow tune, and Kevin pulled her closer. He wanted to ask what was wrong, but instead he said, "You're amazing today." "Thank you," Lauren replied quietly, looking down. There was no usual warmth in her voice. Kevin noticed Derek looking at them from the edge of the court. His face was inscrutable, but his eyes burned with a strange fire. Lauren saw it too. She squeezed Kevin's hand slightly, but was silent. When the song ended, Lauren pulled away. "I'll go check on the kids," she said, and left. Kevin looked after her, feeling growing anxiety. The look in Derek's eyes, the coldness in Lauren's eyes, something was wrong. The party continued, but for him it had already lost its meaning. This was just the beginning. "Okay, let's write the second chapter based on your instructions. I will only focus on the events surrounding Kevin and Derek's father's illness and his decision to pass the business on to Kevin as his eldest son and appoint Derek as his assistant. The volume will be about 5,000 words, and I will not get ahead of myself by limiting myself to this situation. Since this is a text platform, I'll start, and you can stop or correct me at any time. Let's go." A month has passed since that family party, and the warm days of July have given way to the cool breath of August. Summer in the suburbs still retained its charm. The singing of birds in the morning, the smell of mown grass, the slight rustling of leaves in the wind. But for Kevin Wilson, those sounds and smells have long faded into the background. His thoughts were elsewhere: his father, Harry Wilson, whose health was rapidly deteriorating, and the strange tension he felt in the family after that evening. Harry Wilson has always been the pillar of the family. Strong, loud, with a thick beard and hands accustomed to hard work, he seemed invincible. At 65, he still looked younger than his years, thanks to years spent working on construction sites and in workshops. His company, Wilson Construction, was a small but successful family business specializing in home construction and commercial renovations. Harry founded it 40 years ago, starting with one truck and a box of tools, and has since grown it into a business of which he is proud. Kevin remembered from childhood how his father took him to sites, taught him to hold a hammer, measure boards, and check the quality of concrete. "This is your future, son," Harry said, patting him on the shoulder, and Kevin believed him. But now Harry was weakening. It all started with a cough, dry, persistent, which he attributed to dust from another construction site. Then fatigue appeared, which he hid behind jokes and strong coffee. Lauren was the first to notice that something was wrong when Harry refused the traditional steak at the party, citing indigestion. Kevin shrugged it off at the time, but a week after that evening, Harry ended up in the hospital. The diagnosis came like a bolt from the blue. Lung cancer, late stage. The doctors gave him at most 6 months, if he was lucky, a little more. Kevin sat in the living room of his house, staring at the blank TV screen. The kids were already asleep upstairs, Lauren was busy in the kitchen, and he was trying to comprehend how everything had changed in such a short time. Harry insisted on meeting tomorrow not at the hospital, but at home in the old Wilson house where Kevin and Derek grew up. "We need to talk about business," my father said on the phone, and his voice, usually sonorous, trembled with weakness. Kevin knew what this was going to be about. Business, inheritance, responsibility, and Derek. Derek. His half-brother had always been a mystery. Their mothers were different. Kevin was born from Harry's second marriage to Elizabeth, a kind woman who died of a heart attack when Kevin was 15. Derek was the son of Harry's first wife, Mary, who left the family when Derek was 3, leaving him in the care of his father. Harry married Elizabeth a year later, and Kevin was born 2 more later. The age difference between the brothers was small. Kevin was 38, Derek 35, but the gap between them seemed insurmountable. Kevin was open, straightforward, and a man of action. Derek was reserved, calculating, with a sharp mind that he rarely showed in public. Kevin followed in his father's footsteps, working for Wilson Construction from his youth, while Derek went to the city, trained as a programmer, and built a career in it. He returned to his family only on holidays, and even then he kept to himself. But now Harry was calling to them both. Kevin had a feeling this wouldn't be just a conversation. This will be a decision on which the future depends. The next day, Kevin drove up to the Wilsons' old house in his pickup truck. The house was on the edge of town, 2 stories high, with peeling paint on the shutters and a wide porch where Harry liked to smoke his pipe in the evenings. Now the porch was empty, and there was dim light in the windows. Kevin got out of the car, straightened his jacket, and took a deep breath of cool air. He hadn't been here since last Christmas, and now the house seemed somehow foreign, as if his father's illness had taken his soul before his life was gone. Derek was already there. His black sedan was parked outside the garage, and Kevin noticed his brother getting out of the car, adjusting the collar of his shirt. Derek looked as usual, thin, with disheveled dark hair and cold brown eyes. He nodded to Kevin, but didn't say a word. They silently walked up the steps and went inside. Harry sat in the living room in an old leather chair that creaked under his weight. He had lost a lot of weight this month. His cheeks were sunken, his beard seemed too large for his face, and his hands trembled on the armrests. Nearby stood an oxygen tank, the tube from which extended to his nose. But Harry's eyes still burned not as brightly as before, but with the same determination. "Sit down, boys," he croaked, pointing to the sofa opposite. His voice was weak but commanding. "We don't have much time, and I don't want to waste it on nonsense." Kevin sat up, feeling his heart pounding in his chest. Derek sat down next to him, crossing his arms over his chest. Silence hung between them, heavy as lead. "You know what's happening to me?" Harry began, looking from one to the other. "The doctors say I'll last until winter if I'm lucky. I'm not going to give up, but I'm not going to be a fool either. Wilson Construction is my life, and I won't let it fall apart when I'm gone." Kevin nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He was waiting for this conversation, but still wasn't ready. "Kevin, you're the eldest," Harry continued, looking into his eyes. "You know the business like the back of your hand. You've been working with me since you could hold a hammer. I want you to take over the company, become the main one. Make decisions, manage things, keep everything in order." Kevin felt a weight of responsibility fall on his shoulders. He knew that his father would choose him. He was always reliable, solid, someone he could rely on. But hearing it out loud was something else entirely. "Dad, he began, but Harry raised his hand to stop him. "You can handle it, son. I believe in you. But you need an assistant, and that's where Derek comes in." Kevin turned to his brother. Derek sat motionless, his face inscrutable, but a spark flashed in his eyes, either surprise or irritation. "Derek, you're a smart guy," Harry said, coughing into his fist. You have a head on your shoulders and you know how to think ahead. I want you to come home. Helped Kevin. The business needs someone who understands numbers, contracts, those damn computers that I never mastered. You will be his right hand. There was silence. Kevin looked at his father, then at Derek. He expected his brother to start arguing. Derek is not one of those who easily changes his life for the sake of other people's plans. But he was silent, only clenched his jaw slightly. Dad, are you sure? Kevin finally asked. Derek lives in the city. He has his own job. I'm not asking if he wants to, Harry snapped, his voice momentarily regaining its former strength. I ask. This is family. This is the business that fed us all. I don't want it to die with me. Derek nodded slowly, but there was something dark, almost menacing in his gaze. Okay, father, he said quietly. I'll come back. I'll help Kevin. Harry breathed a sigh of relief, leaning back in his chair. That's great. You two are my blood. Work together and everything will be fine. But Kevin didn't feel relieved. He looked at Derek, trying to figure out what he was thinking. His brother was never a team player, and that look. The same one he saw at the party when Derek looked at Lauren. Something told Kevin that this decision by his father would change not only the business, but also their lives. Autumn has arrived in the suburbs with cold winds and golden leaves covering the ground. It's been 2 months since Harry Wilson handed over the reins of Wilson Construction to Kevin and appointed Derek as his assistant. These 2 months were like an endless marathon. Kevin was immersed in the affairs of the company, trying to keep it afloat. Derek returned from the city and took over a small office in their old building, and Harry was fading away. His condition worsened every day, and although he held on with all his strength, everyone understood that the end was near. The morning of October 15th started as usual. Kevin woke up at 6, kissed Lauren's sleeping forehead, and went downstairs to make coffee. The children were still sleeping. The house was quiet. Only the clock on the wall was ticking. He stood at the window, looking at the gray sky, and thought about how much his life had changed. Business required all of his time. Meetings with clients, inspections at construction sites, endless calls. Derek helped silently. Without further ado, he dealt with accounting and contracts, but Kevin felt that his brother was doing this more out of duty than out of desire. There was a wall between them, and it only grew. A phone call broke the silence. Kevin winced, spilling some coffee on the countertop, and grabbed the phone. A nurse called from the hospice where Harry was transferred a week ago. Her voice was calm but heavy. Mr. Wilson, I'm very sorry. Your father passed away tonight. He left quietly in his sleep. Kevin froze, the nurse's words echoing in his head. He knew it was inevitable, but he still wasn't ready. Harry died. His support, his teacher, the man who always seemed stronger than time, was gone. Kevin muttered something like, "Thank you," and hung up, feeling his stomach tighten. He should have called Derek, organized the funeral, told Lauren and the kids. But at that moment, he just stood there, staring into space as the coffee cooled in his mug. Lauren came down half an hour later, already dressed, with her hair in a ponytail. She noticed his condition immediately. "Kevin, what's happened?" she asked, coming closer. "Dad died," he said quietly, without looking at her. "Tonight." Lauren gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Her eyes filled with tears, and she hugged him. Kevin pulled her towards him, feeling the warmth of her body, but even this could not drive away the cold that had settled inside. They stood there for a few minutes until Lauren pulled away. "I need to call my mom," she said, wiping away tears, "and I'll help you with the funeral. Tell me what needs to be done." Kevin nodded, grateful for her support. Lauren had always been there for him in difficult times, and now he needed her more than ever. The day passed in a bustle. Kevin called Derek, who accepted the news in silence, only briefly saying, "I'll be at the hospice in an hour." They met there, signed documents, and talked with the doctor. Derek was as impenetrable as always. No tears, no emotions, just cold efficiency. Kevin tried to find even a drop of grief in him, but he couldn't. Maybe Derek was just better at hiding his feelings than he was. In the evening, Kevin returned home exhausted. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday, 3 days later. Lauren had put the children to bed and was sitting in the living room with a cup of tea when he entered. She looked tired but calm. "How's Derek?" she asked, putting down the cup. As always, Kevin shrugged, sitting down next to him. "Stone, I don't even know what's in his head." Lauren nodded but didn't say anything. Kevin noticed that she tensed slightly, but chalked it up to fatigue. They sat in silence until Lauren stood up. "I'll go take a shower," she said. "Go to bed, you need to rest." Kevin nodded, but didn't want to sleep. He watched Lauren leave upstairs when he suddenly noticed her phone on the coffee table. She forgot him, a rarity for her, always so organized. The screen blinked, and Kevin automatically picked up the device to take it to her. But then a notification arrived. Message. From an unknown number. Kevin wasn't going to look, it wasn't his style. He trusted Lauren. But something clicked in him, maybe because of fatigue, maybe because of the anxiety that wouldn't let him leave the party. He glanced at the screen. "Are you okay? Today is a hard day. If anything happens, I'm here." Nothing special, just words of encouragement. But Kevin felt the blood rush to his head. Who is this? Why didn't Lauren save the number? He swiped the notification and the screen unlocked. Lauren had not set a password. The correspondence opened before him. There were few messages, but they had been going on for a week. Short, seemingly innocent. "How are you?" "Fine, how about you?" "Hang in there." "Thank you, I'm trying." And the last one from yesterday. "Tomorrow will be difficult. Text me if you want to talk." Kevin stared at the screen, feeling his heart pounding. It wasn't someone from the family, he knew all their numbers. Not a friend Lauren always signed contacts. Someone else's. Someone she corresponded with secretly. He scrolled through the messages again, looking for anything that would explain this, but found nothing. Only a cold, inexplicable anxiety squeezed his chest. He heard Lauren's footsteps on the stairs and quickly put the phone back, trying to pretend he didn't see anything. She entered the living room in a robe with damp hair. "Have you gone to bed yet?" she asked, noticing his tense face. "Yes, I'll go now," Kevin managed, forcing himself to smile. Lauren nodded and took the phone without looking at it. She went into the bedroom, and Kevin remained sitting, staring into space. Harry died. Derek was cold. And now this is the correspondence that haunted him. Who was on the other end? And why did Lauren hide this from him? It's been a week since Harry Wilson died. The funeral took place on Saturday, under drizzling rain that turned the cemetery into a gray, dreary picture. The family gathered at the grave, throwing handfuls of earth on the coffin as the priest said a prayer. Kevin stood with the children, holding their hands, Lauren next to him, in a black dress, with an umbrella covering her face. Derek was a little further away, in a dark coat, silently looking at the tombstone. Everything went quietly, without unnecessary words. Harry did not like pathos, and the family respected his will. Now, on Friday evening, the Wilson suburban home was silent. Kevin went to the Wilson construction office to meet with a lawyer to discuss his father's will. The children stayed with their grandmother, Lauren's mother, who offered to take them for the weekend to give Kevin and Lauren some time to catch their breath. Lauren was home alone, or so Kevin thought as he kissed her goodbye and climbed into his pickup truck. But Lauren wasn't alone. At 7:23 p.m., Derek's black sedan pulled silently into the driveway, parking around the corner where it was out of sight from the main road. Derek got out of the car, straightened the collar of his coat, and quickly walked to the back door. He didn't ring the bell, didn't knock, just turned the knob, knowing the door would be open. Lauren was waiting for him. She stood in the kitchen, at the stove, with a glass of wine in her hand. She was wearing a simple gray sweater and jeans. Her hair was loose and slightly disheveled. Seeing Derek, she put her glass on the table and stepped towards him. Their meeting was not accompanied by words, only a sharp movement when Derek grabbed her waist, and she wrapped her arms around his neck. Their lips met in a greedy, almost desperate kiss, as if they had both been waiting for this moment for too long. The wall between duty and desire collapsed, and in that moment there was no Kevin, no family, no business, just the two of them. They didn't say a word until they were in the living room. Lauren pushed Derek onto the sofa, who pulled her along with him, and their movements became hurried, almost feverish. Clothes fell to the floor: Lauren's cardigan, Derek's shirt, his jeans, until they stood in front of each other, vulnerable and thirsty. It was not tenderness or love in the usual sense. It was passion mixed with something dark, almost forbidden. Lauren sat on top of Derek, her fingers digging into his shoulders, his hands gripping her hips. Their breathing was mingled, heavy and ragged, and the sounds they made were drowned out by the low hum of the TV left on in the corner. When it was over, they were left lying on the couch, breathing heavily. Lauren leaned back, her head falling back, her hair scattered over her shoulders. Derek lay next to her, staring at the ceiling, his hand casually resting on her hip. They were silent for several minutes, as if trying to comprehend what had just happened. But this silence was not awkward, it was familiar, as if this was not the first time. "He'll be back in a couple of hours," Lauren finally said, her voice husky but calm. She reached for the glass of wine she had brought from the kitchen and took a sip. Derek nodded, not taking his eyes off the ceiling. "I know. We have time." Lauren looked at him, her eyes narrowed. "Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything? After you stared at me at the party, he became more attentive." Derek grinned, showing any emotion for the first time that evening. His smile was sharp, almost mocking. "Kevin is too busy with his stakes and business to notice anything. He trusts you. Me too. Bye." Lauren set her glass on the table and turned towards him, pulling her knees to her chest. Her face became serious. "This is not a joke, Derek. If he finds out, everything will collapse. Not only for me, but also for you." Derek sat up, rubbing his neck. His gaze became cold, calculating the same as he looked at Kevin the day Harry handed over the role of assistant to him. "He won't know. We'll be careful. But we need to move on, Lauren. Harry is dead. The company is now in our hands, or rather, in his hands. And that's the problem." Lauren frowned, her fingers nervously fiddling with the edge of the sofa cushion. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Kevin isn't the one who should be running this," Derek said, his voice growing harsher. "He's a good guy, a hard worker, but he can't see beyond his own nose. Wilson Construction may be more than just a family store. I see opportunities, new contracts, expansion, technologies, and he would cling to Harry's old ways until everything fell apart." Lauren was silent, looking at him. She knew Derek was right. Kevin was a man of tradition, a man who valued stability over risk. But she also knew that he wouldn't go down without a fight. "And what do you propose?" she asked quietly. Derek leaned closer, his eyes sparkling in the dim room. "We will neutralize him. Not literally, of course." He raised his hand, anticipating her protest. "No blood, no nonsense. We'll just get him out of the way. Let's make sure he leaves on his own." Lauren swallowed, her heart beating faster. "How?" "He has weaknesses," Derek said, leaning back. "He trusts people. Trust too much. We can use this, set him up in front of clients, undermine his reputation in the company, prove that he can't handle it, and I will take his place as the person who saves the business." Lauren looked at him with a mixture of admiration and alarm. "What if he understands? He's not stupid, Derek, and he is my husband." Derek took her hand. His fingers were cold, but his grip was firm. "He won't understand because you'll be next to him. Calm him down, distract him. You know how to do it, Lauren. He believes every word you say." She looked away, feeling a storm of emotions building inside her. She loved Kevin in her own way, sincerely, as a person with whom she had built a life. But Derek was different. He ignited something in her that Kevin could never give: a sense of danger, freedom, power. And now he was offering her not just an affair, but a partnership. Conspiracy. "What about the company?" she asked, returning to the conversation. "If you take her, what will happen to me?" Derek smiled, softer this time, almost affectionately. "You will be with me, Lauren. Not as Kevin's shadow, but as an equal. We'll do this together. Money, control, the future, it's all ours." Lauren was silent, considering his words. She imagined Kevin, his kind blue eyes, his tired smile after a long day, and then Derek, his sharp gaze, his cold confidence. Two brothers, two paths, and she stood between them, holding their fates in her hands. "We need to be careful," she finally said. "One wrong step, and we will lose everything." "I know," Derek nodded. "We'll start slowly. I'll put a couple of mistakes in the documents he'll sign. Nothing obvious, just to make clients start doubting. And you, just be yourself. Play the role of the ideal wife." Lauren nodded, but a cold feeling settled in her chest. She understood what she was getting into. This was not just a deception, it was a betrayal. But there was no turning back. They sat for another half hour, discussing the details. Derek talked about specific clients who could be turned against Kevin, about how to change the numbers in reports to create the appearance of losses. Lauren suggested ways to distract Kevin: family dinners, trips with the kids, conversations about the future that would make him relax. They made a plan, step by step, like two chess players moving pieces towards the inevitable checkmate. When the clock struck 21 o'clock, Derek stood up. "I have to go. He'll be back soon." Lauren walked him to the back door. They kissed again briefly, but with the same passion. "Be careful," she whispered. "And you," he answered, disappearing into the darkness. Lauren closed the door, leaned her back against it, and closed her eyes. She knew she had just crossed a line of no return, and yet, somewhere deep inside, she felt excited. It was her choice, her game. It's been 2 weeks since Harry Wilson's funeral, and November has blanketed the suburbs in gray fog and damp. The days were getting shorter and the nights were getting colder, and Kevin felt the cold seeping into not only his home, but his life. The business demanded his full attention. He spent his days in the Wilson construction office, sorting through the paperwork that Harry had left behind and trying to retain clients who had begun to ask questions about the future of the company. Derek helped, as promised, but his presence only increased the tension. Kevin couldn't shake the feeling that his brother was looking down on him, as if waiting for him to slip up. It was also uneasy at home. Lauren tried to seem like her old self, cooking dinner, putting the kids to bed, smiling at him when he came home late. But Kevin noticed little things. She lingered more often with the phone in her hands, turned away when he entered the room, and her smiles became somehow forced. The correspondence with an unknown number, which he accidentally saw, could not leave his head. He didn't ask her about it. He didn't want to seem paranoid. He didn't want to destroy the trust that was the basis of their marriage. But doubts gnawed at him like rust slowly eating away at metal. The morning of Saturday, November 29th, began with light rain. Kevin woke up early. Despite the day off, a habit developed over years of working with Harry. Lauren was still asleep, curled up under the covers, her blonde hair scattered across the pillow. He looked at her for a few seconds, feeling the usual warmth in his chest, but then he remembered that unknown number and looked away. The children were with Grandma, and the house seemed too quiet. Kevin decided to get down to business, clean out the garage, sort out Harry's old tools, which he brought from the office after his death. He needed something to occupy his hands and head. He pulled on an old jacket, grabbed a cup of coffee, and went out into the garage. There was his pickup truck and Lauren's white sedan, neat as always, with clean windows and shiny rims. Kevin rarely got into her car, but today he noticed that the carpet on the passenger seat was knocked down. Lauren always kept order, and this small imperfection caught his attention. He opened the door to straighten the rug and froze. On the floor, near the front passenger seat, lay a small silver bag. Kevin bent down and picked it up and felt the blood drain from his face. It was a condom, unopened, in shiny packaging, with just a hint of dust on the corner, as if it had been there for days. His hand shook, and he stared at the find as if it were a bomb ready to explode. The first thought was absurd. This is not her car. But it was her car. He himself helped her choose this sedan 3 years ago. He remembered every scratch on the bumper. The second thought hit harder. This is old. Maybe one of your friends left. But Lauren rarely drove anyone other than her children, and their friends weren't the type to leave such things around. And then, she and Lauren did not use condoms after the birth of their second child. She put in an "I would," and this was their common decision. Kevin stood in the garage, holding the bag in his hand, and felt the world around him begin to crumble. His mind raced between explanations, each of which seemed either ridiculous or unbearable. Lauren, hi Lauren, the woman with whom he lived for 9 years, the mother of his children, the one who promised to be with him through thick and thin. No, that's impossible. She couldn't. He threw the condom onto the workbench as if it was burning his fingers and ran his hand over his face. My breathing became heavy and my chest felt tight. He tried to remember the last weeks, her behavior, words, looks. A correspondence with an unknown number surfaced in my memory like a beacon in the fog. Are you okay? If anything happens, I'm here. Who was it, and why didn't she tell him? Kevin returned to the car and began to examine the interior, as if looking for evidence. The glove compartment is empty, just registration papers and a couple of napkins. The seat pockets are nothing but old candy wrappers. There is only dust under the seat. But that condom, it lay there like a mute witness to something Kevin didn't want to believe. He sat in the driver's seat, closed his eyes, and tried to calm down. You're making it up, he said to himself. Lauren loved him. She was always there when Harry got sick, when business began to falter, when he came home exhausted. She couldn't betray him. It would be too cruel. But the doubts did not go away. He remembered the party, the coldness in her eyes, Derek's strange look. Derek. His brother. No, this is crazy. Derek was cold, distant, but he wouldn't. Or would he? Kevin squeezed the steering wheel so hard that his knuckles turned white. He didn't want to think about it, didn't want to connect the dots his mind had already begun to draw. The door to the house opened and Lauren walked out into the garage, wrapping herself in a robe. Her hair was disheveled from sleep, and she held a cup of tea in her hands. Kevin, what are you doing? She asked, her voice soft, but with a hint of surprise. He winced, quickly slamming the car door so she wouldn't see him rummaging around. The condom remained on the workbench, covered with a rag, which he automatically threw on top. Just cleaning up, he managed, trying to sound natural. I decided to take apart the junk. Lauren nodded, moving closer. You got up early. I thought you'd sleep longer after this week. I can't sleep, he answered briefly, avoiding her gaze. She looked at him more closely, as if she sensed something in his tone, but said nothing. Do you want me to make breakfast? She suggested. Yeah, that would be great, Kevin nodded, forcing himself to smile. Lauren went back into the house, and he remained standing, looking after her. Her steps, her voice, her usual care, all this was so familiar, so familiar. But now he was looking for a catch in her every move. This condom burned his mind like a hot coal. Kevin returned to the workbench, took the bag and put it in his jacket pocket. He didn't know what to do with it, throw it away, ask Lauren, pretend he didn't find anything. But he knew one thing for sure, something had changed. The trust he thought was inviolable was cracked, and he wasn't sure he could mend it. December arrived with the first frosts, covering the suburbs with a thin layer of frost. Kevin Wilson's days became an endless series of routines, working at Wilson Construction, calling clients, trying to keep the business afloat after Harry's death. At home, he tried to keep his face, he smiled at the children, talked to Lauren about little things, but something dark, heavy, like lead was growing inside him. The condom found in Lauren's car 2 weeks ago was the first blow to his trust. He hid it in a drawer of the workbench in the garage, but could not hide the doubts that now accompanied his wife's every glance, her every word. Kevin didn't ask Lauren about the discovery. He imagined hundreds of times how he would put this silver bag on the table and look into her eyes, demanding an explanation. But every time I stopped myself. What if she lies? What if he tells the truth? He wasn't sure he was ready to hear either. Instead, he began to notice details. How Lauren went shopping more often in the evenings, how her phone now always had a password, how she avoided long conversations about his work with Derek. And Derek, his cold glances, rare but sharp comments about business, his presence, which now seemed threatening to Kevin, all this formed a mosaic that he was afraid to fully assemble. By December 5th, Kevin realized he couldn't live in this fog of uncertainty. He needed facts, not guesses, not suspicions, but evidence. He did not trust himself his emotions could cloud his mind, make him see what was not there, or, conversely, close his eyes to the obvious. He needed someone from the outside, a professional, private detective. The decision did not come immediately. Kevin spent several nights sitting in the living room with the lights off while Lauren slept upstairs. He weighed the pros and cons, feeling shame fighting with despair. Hiring a detective meant admitting that his marriage, his family, his life were at risk. But not hiring meant continuing to drown in the doubts that had already begun to poison him every day. In the end, he chose clarity, no matter how painful it was. The next day, at lunchtime, Kevin sat in his pickup truck in the office parking lot and searched the internet for Suburban Private Investigator. He came across the website of one Ray Collins, a former cop with 20 years of experience who was now working for himself. The reviews were scant, but businesslike, fast, discreet, results. Kevin called. "Collins is listening," came a low voice with a slight hoarseness. "Hello, I need help," Kevin began, feeling his throat go dry. "This is a personal matter. My wife, I think she's cheating on me." There was a short pause, but the voice on the other end remained calm. "Give me your name, address, habits. The more details, the faster I will start. And how much are you willing to pay?" Kevin explained everything he could. Lauren's name, the model of her car, their daily routine, her frequent shopping trips in the evenings. He mentioned Derek, not as a suspect, but as someone who spends a lot of time around, trying not to reveal his thoughts. Collins named the price $500 in advance, the rest according to the result. Kevin agreed, transferred money through the app, and made an appointment in a week. "I'll send you a report when there's something specific," Collins said. "Sit quietly and don't twitch. If she's hiding something, I'll find it." Kevin hung up, feeling both lighter and heavier. He took a step that cannot be undone. Now all that was left was to wait. The next few days passed painfully slowly. Kevin tried to behave as usual. He took the children to school in the morning, worked with Derek in the office during the day, and had dinner with Lauren in the evening. But every time she picked up the phone or left the room, his heart sank. Derek was also nearby. He came to the office, sorted out papers, nodded silently at meetings. Kevin found himself studying him. Movements, facial expressions, intonations. Was there something about him that would give away the secret? Or is it just his imagination? On the evening of December 12th, Kevin received a message from Collins. "Here's the story. Meet tomorrow, 10 a.m., at Joe's on Main Street." Kevin barely slept that night. He lay next to Lauren, listening to her even breathing, and thought that this might be the last night when he still believed in their marriage. The next morning, he told Lauren he was going to the office early and left. Joe's Cafe was a small place with shabby couches and the smell of frying bacon. Collins was already waiting for him, a short, stocky man of about 50, with gray hair at the temples and tired eyes. There was a brown envelope on the table in front of him. "Sit down," he said briefly, pushing the envelope. "This is what I found." Kevin sat up, his hands shaking slightly as he took the envelope. He opened it and pulled out a stack of photographs. The first is Lauren leaving their house, getting into the car, time in the photo, 19:15, 3 days ago. The second is her sedan parking at the Sunset Motel on the outskirts of town, a place Kevin has heard of but has never been to. Third, she goes to number 12, looking around. And then he saw the fourth photo, Lauren and Derek. They stood at the motel door, their lips locked in a kiss. Her arms wrapped around his neck, his fingers digging into her waist. The light of the lantern illuminated their faces, and there was no doubt it was them. Kevin felt the blood drain from his face and his stomach tighten. He scrolled further. More pictures. They enter the room. The door closes. An hour later, they leave. Lauren straightens her hair. Derek looks around. "All this in 3 days," Collins said, sipping his coffee. "They met there twice, Tuesday and Thursday, both times for about an hour. I can dig further if you want." Kevin didn't answer. He looked at the photographs and the world around him seemed to slow down. Lauren, Derek, his wife, and his brother. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a stab in the back from the two people he trusted the most. His mind screamed, demanding to throw the pictures on the table, go home, break into the office, start a scandal. But he sat motionless, squeezing the paper so that the edges were crumpled. "Are you okay?" Collins asked, narrowing his eyes. "Yes," Kevin lied, his voice hoarse. "How much do I owe for this?" "Another 500. And tell me if you need more." Kevin nodded, took out his phone, and transferred the money. "That's enough for now. I will think." Collins shrugged, finished his coffee, and walked away, leaving Kevin alone. He sat for another 10 minutes, looking at the pictures. Shock gave way to pain, pain to rage, and then something cold and calculating came. He could go to Lauren right now, throw the photos in her face, scream, demand answers. He could have burst into Derek's office, grabbed him by the chest, and beaten the truth out of him. But what will this give? They will lie, get away, and he will be left with a broken life and without a plan. No, Kevin didn't want to be a victim. He didn't want to give them this power. If they think they can play behind his back, he will play smarter. He will put his emotions aside. He will show them that he knows nothing, that he trusts them as before. And he himself will start digging. Look for weak points. Collect evidence. He didn't know what he would do about it in the end, but one thing was clear. He wouldn't let them win so easily. Kevin put the photos back into the envelope, hid it in his jacket, and left the cafe. The rain started again, fine and cold, but he didn't even notice. His mind was already working, forming a plan. They thought he was blind. He will prove them wrong. Winter finally came into its own by mid-December. Snow fell in rare flakes, covering the suburbs with a thin white layer, and the frost drew patterns on the windows of houses. For Kevin Wilson, these days became a test not only because of the cold, but also because of the inner storm that he hid under a mask of calm. Photographs of Lauren and Derek, obtained from private investigator Ray Collins, were hidden in an old toolbox in the garage. Every time he passed by, he felt their presence, like a thorn under his skin. But he didn't take them out again. He didn't want to give in to his emotions. He decided to play smarter. Kevin returned home on the evening of December 18th, Friday, after a long day at the Wilson construction office. He pretended that nothing had changed. He joked with employees, discussed new contracts with Derek, and signed papers. Derek was as always cold, matter of fact, with a slight hint of arrogance in his voice. Kevin looked at him and imagined those pictures, his hands on Lauren, their kiss outside the motel. But he smiled, nodded, patted his brother on the shoulder as if they were one team. This was his first line of defense, not letting them know that he knew. At home, Lauren met him in the living room. She was sitting on the sofa with a book in her hands. The children were already sleeping upstairs. She was wearing a cozy sweatshirt and soft pants, with her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. She looked like the perfect wife, the same Lauren he had loved all these years. But now Kevin saw her as an actress playing a role. "You're late," she said, putting the book down and smiling. "How is the day?" Kevin took off his jacket, hung it on the hook by the door, and forced himself to smile back. "Fine. A lot of papers." Derek was arguing about some numbers again. Tired as a dog. Lauren stood up, walked over to him, and hugged him, pressing her cheek to his chest. Her warmth, her smell, it was all so familiar, so familiar. For a second, Kevin almost believed that nothing had changed. But then he remembered the motel, Derek, the condom in her car, and his body tensed, although he tried not to show it. "You're all ice," she said, pulling away and looking into his eyes. "Go take a shower, and I'll heat up dinner." "Thank you, darling," he replied, squeezing her shoulder lightly. His voice sounded even, but inside he was screaming. How could she? How could she stand here, hug him, smile, knowing what she was doing behind his back? He went up to the bathroom, turned on the hot water, and stood under the stream until steam filled the room. This had been his ritual for the last few days to wash away not only the dirt, but also the anger that threatened to burst out. He couldn't afford to lose his temper. Not now. Lauren and Derek thought he was blind, that he was a gullible fool who didn't suspect anything, and Kevin decided to use this against them. Let them think that he is in their power. Let them relax, and he will wait, watch, and collect information. He didn't know how far they would go, but he was sure this was not just treason. There was something more behind this. After his shower, he went downstairs. Lauren had already set the table chicken casserole, salad, a bottle of red wine. She sat opposite him, pouring his wine, and looked so caring, so sincere. Kevin looked at her and felt his heart torn between love and hate. "How are the children doing?" he asked, taking a sip of wine, a common question to fill the silence. "Okay," she answered, smiling. Emma was drawing something for school today, and Jake again asked for a new construction set. They missed their grandfather. Kevin nodded, trying not to show the pain that Harry's mention caused. "I miss him too," he said quietly. "Sometimes it feels like he's still here, you know. It's like he's going to walk in the door and start teaching me how to properly cut meat." Lauren laughed, her laugh as melodious as before. "He was a stubborn old man, but good." "Yes," Kevin agreed, looking into her eyes. "He trusted people. He probably trusted too much." Her smile wavered slightly, but she quickly looked away, reaching for her fork. Kevin noticed it, a subtle gesture, but now he saw everything. Her every step, every word was under a microscope. He pretended to believe her, that nothing had changed, but inside he was already making a plan. He didn't know what they wanted, just sex, money, companies, but he was going to find out. Meanwhile, a few miles from the Wilson home, at the Sunset Motel, Lauren and Derek met that night after Kevin fell asleep. It was around midnight when Lauren quietly slipped out of the house, leaving a note about a milk trip in case he woke up. Her sedan stopped at the familiar number 12, and Derek was already waiting for her inside. The room was dimly lit by a lamp on the nightstand, the bed was covered with a cheap blanket, and the air smelled of cigarettes and dampness. Derek was sitting in a chair by the window, a bottle of beer in his hand, his dark hair slightly disheveled. Lauren walked in, closed the door, and threw her bag on the floor. "You're late," he said without looking at her. "Kevin didn't fall asleep for a long time," she answered, taking off her coat. "He's kind of thoughtful today." Derek finally turned to her, his brown eyes narrowed. "Does he suspect something?" Lauren shook her head, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "No, he's too tired to dig. But we need to be careful. I don't want to take any risks." Derek put the bottle on the table and walked over to her, standing so close that she felt the warmth of his body. "We are already careful. But you're right, it's time to speed up. Harry is dead, the company is in his hands, and he begins to ask questions. Today in the office, he was digging through old reports again. If he finds something, I've changed." Lauren tensed, her fingers gripping the edge of the covers. "You said it was invisible." "It is," Derek snapped. "But he's not stupid, Lauren. He trusts me, but only as long as everything goes smoothly. We need to act before he starts to doubt." She looked at him, her face hardening. "And what do you propose?" Derek sat down next to him. His voice became quieter, but there was a steely note in it. "We'll make him unbalanced. Let's undermine his authority. Let's imagine that the board of directors is unable to cope with the workload after Harry's death. A suspension is all we need for me to take control." Lauren frowned as she considered his words. Wilson Construction's board of directors consisted of 5 people, Kevin as the head, Derek as his assistant, and 3 of Harry's old partners, Bill Henderson, Martha Crow, and Jack Taylor. They respected Kevin, but were pragmatic. If they are convinced that he is losing his grip, they may vote for a temporary change in leadership. "How do we do this?" she asked, leaning closer. Derek chuckled, his smile cold, almost predatory. "We'll start with the little things. I'll slip him a couple of errors in the paperwork, nothing serious, but enough for clients to start complaining. At home, you will be adding fuel to the fire, saying that he works too much, that he is on the verge of a breakdown. Maybe even arrange a scene where he breaks down on you in front of witnesses." Lauren swallowed, feeling the anxiety building inside her. "He won't break down. He's too calm for that. Then we'll provoke him, Derek said, looking into her eyes. You know his weaknesses: children, family, trust. If he starts to think that he is losing control at home or at work, he will break down. And I will be there to save the company. Lauren was silent, weighing his plan. It was risky, but doable. She knew Kevin better than anyone. She knew how he reacted to pressure, how he tried to keep everything in his hands. If they can convince everyone that he is unstable, the council may vote for Derek. And then they will get everything. What if he understands? She asked quietly. What if he starts digging? Derek took her hand, his fingers cold but sure. He won't understand. You play your role too well. He looks at you and sees the wife he loves. Keep it up, Lauren. Distract him, and I'll do the rest. She nodded, but a feeling of guilt grew in her chest. She remembered dinner, his tired smile, his words about Harry. But then she remembered Derek, his strength, his promises, his vision of a future where she was not just Kevin's shadow, but an equal. And this feeling overpowered. Okay, she said finally, let's do this. But slowly, no sudden movements. Agreed, Derek nodded. Let's start on Monday. I'll correct a couple of reports, and you, be gentle with him. Let him think that everything is perfect. They sat for another half hour, discussing the details, what documents to replace, how Lauren could sow doubt in Kevin, how to present this to the council. Every step was thought out, like a move in a chess game. When Lauren left, leaving Derek at the motel, she felt like a spider weaving a web. But somewhere deep inside, she knew that this net could catch her too. And Kevin, lying in bed at home, pretended to be asleep when she returned. He heard her quietly enter and place the keys on the table. He didn't know where she was, but he felt that something was preparing, and he was ready to wait until their web of lies entangled them. Kevin sat in his office at Wilson Construction, a small space with a wooden desk littered with papers and an old chair that creaked with every movement. Outside the window, one could see the yard where workers were loading boards into a truck, despite the frost. He had just finished a call with a client who unexpectedly canceled the order, citing uncertainty about timing. This was the second rejection in a week, and Kevin could feel the pressure building. Derek, sitting in the next office, slipped him a report in the morning with minor errors, nothing critical, but enough to raise questions from an attentive eye. Kevin noticed this, but signed without saying a word. He knew his brother was playing his own game and decided to play along for now. There was a knock on the door, and Emily Russell walked in, a short woman of about 35 with short brown hair and lively green eyes. She had been working for the company for 10 years, starting as a secretary and now coordinating projects. Emily was one of the few people Kevin trusted, not as a brother or wife, but as a friend who always spoke straight. They met back when Harry was alive and teaching Kevin the basics of business, and since then she has become his unofficial advisor. Hey, Kev, she said, closing the door behind her. She had a folder in her hands, but her face looked worried. Do you have a minute? Always for you, he answered, leaning back in his chair and forcing himself to smile. What's happened? Emily sat down opposite her, put the folder on the table, but did not open it. She looked into his eyes, and Kevin sensed that this was not an ordinary work conversation. I heard something, she began, lowering her voice, and I don't like it. Rumor has it, Kevin, about you. He frowned, feeling a chill in his chest. What rumors? Emily hesitated, as if searching for words. I was at the warehouse this morning checking on supplies for the Elm Street project. Bill Henderson and Martha Crow were there, from the board of directors. They didn't see me. They stood behind a stack of boards and talked about you. Kevin tensed. Bill and Martha were Harry's old partners, people who had known him since childhood. They always supported him, even when Harry got sick and handed over the company to him. And what did they say? He asked, trying to keep his voice even. Emily sighed, her fingers nervously fiddling with the edge of the folder. Bill said you've become unstable. That after Harry's death you lost your touch. Martha agreed and said that clients are complaining about delays and you can't cope with the load. And then Bill added something else. He said he heard you started drinking, that someone saw you with a bottle in the office. Kevin froze, his mind racing at double speed. Drink? He didn't touch alcohol except for a glass of wine with Lauren on the weekends. The last time he got drunk was at a friend's wedding 5 years ago, and it was only a slight buzz from champagne. The rumors of instability could be related to client refusals. He already suspected that Derek was fudging the numbers to frame him. But alcohol, it was a lie, pure and simple. "Has anyone seen me with a bottle?" he asked, his voice becoming harsher. "This is nonsense, Emily. You know that I don't drink." "I know," she said quickly, raising her hands defensively. "I didn't believe them, Kev." But they spoke so confidently as if they had proof. "I wanted to warn you. Something is happening, and it's not just gossip." Kevin leaned back in his chair, looking at the ceiling. His heart was pounding and his thoughts were racing. Bill and Martha were shareholders whose opinions weighed more than his own on the board of directors. If they started to doubt him, that could be a problem. And the rumors about drunkenness. It was too specific, too targeted, and he knew who was behind it. Derek, and maybe Lauren. He remembered their recent dinner, how Lauren had gently urged him to rest, how Derek had hinted in the office that he looked tired. This was not just a hint, it was part of the plan. They wanted to make him look weak, unreliable, in order to undermine his authority. But where did this lie about alcohol come from? Someone must have started the rumor, and Kevin was sure it was no accident. "Thank you for telling me," he finally said, looking at Emily. "Do you know who could have started this?" She shook her head. "Don't know, but I heard Martha mention Derek. She said that he looks more collected compared to you. Maybe he planted something." Kevin nodded, trying not to reveal his thoughts. Derek, certainly. His brother, who was now his right hand, but in fact sharpened the knife behind his back. And Lauren. She could have been part of it, playing along at home to make him look like he was on the verge of a breakdown. Photos from the motel came back to him, and he clenched his fists under the table. "I'll figure it out," he said, forcing himself to smile. "It's probably just a misunderstanding. Clients are nervous, that's all." Emily looked at him doubtfully, but nodded. "Be careful, Kev. If you need something, tell me. I'm on your side." "Thank you, Em," he answered sincerely. "You are one of the few people I trust." She left, leaving a folder with reports, and Kevin remained sitting, looking out the window. Rumors about his instability and drunkenness were not just gossip, they were a blow to his reputation, carefully planned and executed. He didn't drink, he didn't lose his temper, but someone wanted everyone to think differently. And this someone was inside the company, inside his family. He stood up, went to the cabinet, and took out Harry's old mug that he kept in his office. It was empty, but Kevin remembered how his father would sometimes pour whiskey in it after a hard day. Maybe someone saw him with this mug and decided to turn it into a story? No, it's too far-fetched. It was something else, a lie planted with intent. Kevin returned to the table, picked up his phone, and texted Collins. "Need more. Keep an eye on Derek. I want to know who he's talking to." He hasn't mentioned Lauren yet, but he knew they were working together and rumors were their next step. He had to stay one step ahead, pretending not to notice anything. When the day was over, Kevin drove home, smiling at Lauren as usual. But inside, he was ready for war. His allies doubted him, and he knew who was weaving this web. Now his task is to prevent it from slamming shut. The new year started with a frosty morning and a thin layer of snow blanketing the suburbs. For Kevin Wilson, the new year was not a holiday, but just another day in the game he was playing against Lauren and Derek. Rumors about his instability and drunken drinking that Emily had described confirmed his suspicions. His wife and brother weren't just betraying him in his personal life, they were trying to take Wilson Construction away from him. The photographs of their meetings at the motel, Emily's words about the doubts of the shareholders, the small errors in the reports that Derek had slipped in it, all added up to a plan that Kevin now saw clearly. They wanted to make him look weak, unreliable, and remove him from management. But he wasn't going to give up. Kevin decided to seize the initiative, but not openly. He understood that direct confrontation would play into their hands. Any breakdown, any scandal would only confirm their lies about his instability. Instead, he chose a different tactic, pretending to be what they wanted him to be: tired, distracted, incompetent. He will make stupid steps, deliberately make mistakes, give them a reason to relax, to feel like winners. Let them think that he is broken, that their plan is working. Meanwhile, he will wait until they show their cards completely. The first opportunity came on Monday. At the Wilson construction office, a meeting was scheduled with a potential client, the construction firm Hartman Building, which wanted to commission the renovation of 3 commercial buildings in the city center. The contract amount was significant, about $300,000, and this could strengthen the company's position after recent refusals from other clients. Kevin knew that Derek would be at the meeting, watching his every move, and that Lauren would later ask how it went, looking for weaknesses. This was the perfect moment for his move. The morning started as usual. Kevin arrived at the office at 8 and greeted Emily, who gave him a worried look but said nothing. Derek was already there, sitting at his desk with his laptop, his thin face illuminated by the screen. He nodded briefly to Kevin without looking up from his work. "We have Hartman at 10, Kevin reminded, putting a mug of coffee on the table. "Have you prepared the numbers?" "Yes," Derek answered, his voice as cold as always. "Everything is in the folder. Don't sign anything different from last time." Kevin smiled, hiding his outburst of anger. Not that. These were the same reports with errors that Derek himself slipped in, but he nodded, pretending not to notice the joke. "I'll try, brother." Derek glanced at him briefly, but didn't say anything. Kevin felt his brother studying him, looking for cracks, and he was going to give him these cracks, but on his own terms. By 10 o'clock, everyone had gathered in the meeting room. Kevin, Derek, and 2 representatives of Hartman: Richard Hartman, a heavy-set man with a thick mustache, and his assistant Linda Cox, a woman with sharp features and a notepad in her hands. Emily brought the coffee and quietly left, leaving them alone. Kevin sat at the head of the table, Derek to his right with a folder of documents and clients opposite. "It's good to see you," Kevin began, smiling widely. "Wilson Construction is always ready for new projects. Tell us what you need." Richard nodded, cleared his throat, and spoke. "We have 3 buildings on Main Street. Old warehouses need to be converted into offices. Complete reconstruction: walls, wiring, roofing. The period is 3 months. Budget up to $300,000. What can you offer?" Kevin pretended to think, rubbing his chin. He had already studied their request in advance and knew that the company could meet the $250,000 if they optimized materials and labor. It would be a lucrative contract that would enhance his reputation, but instead he decided to play his part. "Well, 3 months is realistic," he began, drawing out his words slightly, as if he wasn't sure. "We have guys, they can handle it. I think we'll keep it to 320,000 or 330. Derek, how much is it?" Derek looked at him, his eyebrows raised slightly. Kevin noticed this, a slight surprise, quickly hidden behind a cold mask. "Everything is counted in the folder, Kevin," he said, pushing the documents towards him. 250,000 if there are no delays." "Oh, right," Kevin slapped his forehead, feigning absent-mindedness. 250, after the holidays my head doesn't cook. But yes, 250 is fine. Although, maybe a little more if the materials become more expensive. They're getting more expensive, right?" Richard frowned as he exchanged glances with Linda. "We were counting on 300 maximum. If you're talking about 250, that's good, but what about the timing? 3 months is a hard deadline." Kevin nodded, but instead of answering confidently, he began to mumble. "Well, 3 months. This, of course, is possible. Although we have a couple of projects now, and the guys are a little busy, but we will cope with it. Could be. Derek, we have free crews, right?" Derek looked at him again, and this time there was something akin to satisfaction in his gaze. "Yes, there is," he answered briefly. "We can start in a week." "Great." Kevin smiled wider than necessary and turned to Richard. "So, We'll start in a week. Or in 2 if something goes wrong. But it won't work, I'm sure. Well, I'm almost sure. Linda scribbled something down on her notepad, her face blank, and Richard cleared his throat, clearly unimpressed. We need precision, Mr. Wilson. This is a serious project, if you are not sure about the timing. Oh, I'm sure, Kevin interrupted, raising his hands. It's just, after my father's death, everything is a little chaotic. But we're in business. Derek has everything under control, right? Derek nodded, his lips twitching slightly in a hint of a smile. Kevin saw it his brother bought into his game. He wanted Derek to think that he was losing his grip, that he was failing. And it worked. The negotiations ended after half an hour. Hartman agreed to sign the contract, but with a caveat. Any delays would result in fines. Kevin knew the company could handle it. He had already checked crew schedules and material availability. But his uncertainty, his mistakes sowed the seeds of doubt. And that was exactly what he wanted. That evening, Kevin returned home. Lauren was in the kitchen preparing dinner. The smell of fried onions and garlic filled the air. She turned around, wiping her hands on a towel. "How are you?" she asked, her voice soft and caring. Kevin shrugged, tossing his jacket on the chair. "Fine. There were negotiations with Hartman. Everything seemed to go well, but I may have messed up a little. The head is out of place." Lauren moved closer, placing her hand on his shoulder. "You work too much, Kev. Maybe take a day off." He looked into her eyes, feeling how everything inside was shrinking. She played her role perfectly, a caring wife, ready to support. But he knew it was part of their plan. "Maybe you're right," he said, sighing. "I will think." She smiled, and Kevin noticed how her eyes became a little softer. She believed. She thought that he was on the verge, that their network was tightening. And that was exactly what he wanted. Later, when Lauren went to the store, Kevin was left alone and allowed himself a small smile. His blind moves worked. They will relax and make a mistake, and he will wait. January brings with it icy winds and long, dark evenings that seem to reflect Kevin Wilson's state of mind. After negotiations with the Hartman building, he was convinced that his strategy was working. Lauren and Derek believed in his weakness, relaxed, and began to consider him vulnerable. Their looks, their words, their subtle smiles gave it away. But Kevin knew that pretending wasn't enough. If he wants to win this war, he needs proof not only of their treason, but also of their plans against him and Wilson Construction. The motel photos were a good start, but he wanted more. He wanted to catch them red-handed, expose their game, and turn over the board on which they so confidently placed the pieces. Kevin understood that he needed to act quietly, unnoticed. Lauren and Derek were careful their meetings at the motel. The falsification of reports, the rumors about his instability were thought out to the smallest detail. But he knew everyone has weaknesses, and even the most cunning plans leave traces. He decided to start a hidden war to collect incriminating evidence, step by step, using all the resources available to him. This meant eavesdropping, surveillance, and Harry's old connections that could give him an advantage. The first thing Kevin did was return to Ray Collins, a private detective who had already proven his effectiveness. On Friday evening, he met him at the St. Joe's Cafe on Main Street. Snow was falling quietly outside the window, and inside there was the smell of coffee and fried dough. Collins sat in the corner, mug in hand, his tired eyes watching Kevin closely as he sat down across from him. "We need more work," Kevin began, lowering his voice. "I want you to keep an eye on Derek. And for Lauren when she's not at home. I need to know where they go, who they meet, and what they say." Collins nodded without changing his expression. "I look after 2, it's more expensive. 1,000 in advance, plus expenses. What exactly are you looking for?" Kevin took the envelope of cash out of his pocket and slid it across the table. "Whatever you can find. Conversations, meetings, any evidence. They are plotting something against me not only personally, but also in business. I want to know how far it went." "Got it." Collins took the envelope without even looking inside. "I'll start tomorrow. Photos, videos, recordings, I'll give you everything I catch. But if they are careful, it will take time. I have time, Kevin replied, although inside he felt it slipping through his fingers. Just be invisible. Collins nodded curtly and left, leaving Kevin with his cooling coffee. This was the first step surveillance that would give him visual evidence. But he knew that this was not enough. He needed to hear them, to know what they were talking about behind closed doors. The next step was riskier. Kevin decided to bug Derek's office at Wilson Construction. He wasn't an expert at espionage, but the internet and a little ingenuity could work wonders. On Saturday morning, while Lauren was out grocery shopping and the kids were at school for extracurricular activities, Kevin stopped at a small electronics store on the outskirts of town. There he bought 2 miniature recording devices, simple ones, with a battery for a week and memory for 48 hours of sound. The seller, a bored guy of about 20, didn't even ask why he needed them. He simply punched the receipt and put the boxes in a bag. Returning home, Kevin hid the devices in the garage among Harry's old tools and waited until nightfall. On Sunday, he told Lauren he was going to the office to check papers, a common excuse that she accepted without question. The office was empty on the weekend, and Kevin used his key to enter. Derek's office was next to his own, a small room with a metal desk, a laptop, and a filing cabinet. Kevin closed the door, turned on the flashlight on his phone, and began looking for a place to listen. He stopped at the underside of the table. There was a small shelf where the device could go unnoticed. He attached it with double-sided tape, turned on the recording, and checked that the lead was working. The green light blinked, and when out the device was active. He decided to leave the second wiretap for home, but for now he hid it in his pocket. He wasn't sure where to install it in the bedroom, in the kitchen. This took time and care so Lauren wouldn't notice. For now, he left the office, locked the door, and drove home, feeling the adrenaline pulsing through his veins. He crossed the line. Now he is not just a victim, but a hunter. The third step was more difficult, but potentially the most important: Harry's old business contacts. Kevin knew that his father had left not only a business, but also a network of people who had worked with him for decades. Among them were suppliers, contractors, even former competitors who became friends. If Derek and Lauren were planning to take over the company, they could leave traces in the past deals, conversations, promises. Kevin decided to turn to one of Harry's most trusted people, Tom Reynolds, the owner of the sawmill who had been supplying Wilson Construction with wood for the last 20 years. On Tuesday, Kevin went to Tom under the pretext of discussing deliveries. Reynolds' sawmill was an hour's drive from town, surrounded by a pine forest covered in snow. Tom met him at the entrance, a strong old man with a gray beard and calloused hands, dressed in a plaid shirt and jeans. "Kevin, good to see you," Tom said, clapping him on the shoulder. "How are you doing without Harry?" "We'll hang in there," Kevin replied, forcing himself to smile. "I'm trying not to drown his case." They walked into a small office that smelled of tar and coffee. Tom poured them a mug each, and Kevin began talking about supplies, but soon turned it into the right direction. "Tom, you knew your father better than anyone," he said, looking into his mug. "He trusted you. Be honest. Has Derek ever talked to you about the company? Well, after Harry got sick." Tom frowned, rubbing his beard. "Derek? Yes, it happened. A month ago, I called and asked if we could reduce the prices on boards. He said that he wanted to optimize costs. I replied that Harry and I had an agreement, and I would not change it. He didn't insist, but his voice was cold, you know." Kevin nodded, feeling a spark ignite within him. Didn't he hint that he wants more control? Maybe he said something about me. Tom thought, looking out the window. Not directly, but he once said, "Kevin is a good guy, but he doesn't always see the future." I didn't pay any attention to it at the time. I thought it was just ordinary chatter. But now that you ask, it sounds weird. "It's strange, yes," Kevin agreed, hiding his excitement. This was the first hint Derek was already testing the ground, preparing allies. He thanked Tom, promised to call back, and left, knowing that he had found the lead. Now I had to pull. By the end of the week, Kevin had retrieved the first recording from the wiretap in Derek's office. That evening, after Lauren put the kids to bed, he locked himself in the garage, connected the device to his laptop, and put on headphones. At first, there was only rustling, clattering of keys, occasional calls. But then he heard Derek's voice, cold, harsh, talking on the phone. "Yes, it's me. No, he doesn't notice anything. Signs everything I give. Listen, Bill, he's on the edge. A couple more weeks, and the council itself will ask me to take the helm. Just support me, okay?" Kevin froze. Bill Henderson, one of the shareholders. Derek was clearly talking to him, and it wasn't just talk, it was a conspiracy. He recorded a few more minutes, but heard nothing more concrete. However, this was enough. His brother had been weaving a web, and Kevin now had proof. The hidden war has begun. Eavesdropping, Collins' surveillance, old connections, all this was his weapon. He didn't know how far he would go, but he was ready to fight to the end. The snow outside the windows of the Wilson construction office was falling in thick flakes, covering the suburb with a white blanket, but inside his world there was chaos, carefully hidden under a mask of calm. His hidden war against Lauren and Derek was gaining momentum. Eavesdropping in Derek's office had already yielded its first fruits. Ray Collins' continued surveillance, and a conversation with Tom Reynolds confirmed that Derek had long been preparing the ground for taking over the company. Kevin pretended to be weak, absent-minded, signed falsified documents, and pretended not to notice their games. But every step was calculated. He waited for the moment when they would make a mistake. That moment came on Friday. The day started with minor troubles. Another client, a small contractor from a neighboring city, called and refused the order, citing inaccuracies in the estimate. Kevin knew it was Derek's doing. He'd seen his brother accidentally mix up the numbers on the last report he'd signed while playing his role as a careless executive. In the office, he smiled at Derek, shrugged and said, "Nothing, we'll figure it out." But inside his anger was seething. He felt their network tightening as the shareholders Bill, Martha, Jack began to whisper behind his back, fueled by rumors of his instability. At home, Lauren also played her part. She was gentler than usual. She cooked his favorite dishes, offered to relax, even organized a family evening with the children where they watched an old movie and ate popcorn. But Kevin saw right through it. Her concern was part of a plan to get him to relax, to make him look even more exhausted with her support. He smiled at her and thanked her, but every time she picked up the phone or went to the store, his suspicions only grew stronger. The climax occurred in the evening of the same day. Kevin decided to stay in the office late, ostensibly to get some paperwork done. He called Lauren and said he would stay until 9, knowing that she could use that time to meet with Derek. But this time he was prepared. In his jacket pocket was a small digital voice recorder bought last week along with the listening devices. He didn't plan to use it today, but he kept it with him just in case. This was his reserve trump card. To his surprise, Lauren showed up at the office around 8 in the evening. He heard her heels clicking down the hall and quickly cleared the papers from his desk, pretending to just sit there in thought. The door opened and she walked in, wearing a long coat, her blonde hair flowing, slightly tousled by the wind. Her face was tense, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Kevin, what are you doing?" she asked, closing the door behind her. Her voice was sharp, with a hint of irritation that he had not heard before. He looked at her, feigning fatigue. "I'm just working, Lore. We need to sort out this mess. Another client dropped today." Lauren tossed her bag onto the chair and crossed her arms. "You're in the office all day, but there's no point. Why can't you just let it go?" Kevin frowned, feeling a spark ignite within him. This was not an ordinary conversation. There was something new, something dangerous in her tone. He decided to play along, strengthening his weakness. "Let go. This is Dad's company, Lauren. I can't just leave her." She stepped closer, her eyes narrowed. "You can't or don't want to. Kevin, look at you. You're exhausted. You make mistakes. Clients leave. Maybe it's time to admit that you can't cope." Her words hit like a slap in the face, but Kevin restrained himself, lowering his gaze to the table. He quietly put his hand in his pocket, felt for the recorder, and pressed the record button. A red light blinked under the fabric. The device started working. He didn't know where this conversation would lead, but he felt that this might be his chance. "Can't cope?" he asked, adding a note of confusion to his voice. "Do you really think so?" Lauren sighed, her shoulders tense. She was clearly on edge. Something had thrown her off balance, and Kevin decided to take advantage of it. "I'm just tired, Lore. After Harry, it's all on me. Derek helps, but—" "Derek," she snapped, her voice becoming harsher. "That's it, Kevin. Derek helps. And maybe he would have done a better job than you." Kevin froze, his heart pounding. She said it, aloud. He looked up, feigning shock. "What do you mean?" Lauren stepped even closer, her emotions exploding. She clearly didn't plan to say this, but something, fatigue, nerves, the pressure of her and Derek's plan broke her restraint. "I mean, Derek has perspective. He is smart, he knows how to do business, how to get the company out of this hole. And you cling to Harry's old ways, signing everything without even looking. Do you think I don't see how everything is falling apart? Maybe if Derek was in charge, we wouldn't be losing clients every week." Kevin looked at her, his face a mask of surprise and pain, but inside he was jubilant. She got caught. Her words, her confession, everything was recorded on the tape recorder in his pocket. He knew she wouldn't say directly about their plot, but that was enough. This was her first mistake, her mistake, and he was going to take advantage of her. "Do you want Derek to take the company?" he asked quietly, adding a tremor to his voice. "My brother? Do you think he's better than me?" Lauren hesitated, her anger beginning to fade, replaced by worry. She realized that she had gone too far, but it was too late to retreat. "I'm not saying he's a better person than you, Kev. But, yes, maybe he would have done better in business. You're too exhausted, too stubborn. I just want everything to be good for us, for the children." Kevin lowered his head, as if her words had broken him. He was silent for several seconds, letting her believe that she had won, that he had given up. The recorder continued to write, recording her every word, every shade of her voice. "I didn't think you meant that," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I really can't wait." Lauren walked up to him and placed her hand on his shoulder, her tone softening. "I didn't want to offend you. Just think about it, okay? We will find a way out." He nodded without looking up. "Fine, I will think." She squeezed his shoulder, took her bag, and walked out, leaving him alone. Kevin waited until her footsteps died down in the hallway. Then he pulled out the recorder and turned off the recording. He connected it to his phone through headphones and listened. Her voice harsh, emotional, accusing was clear. "Derek could have done a better job. You make mistakes. Maybe if he was in charge." It wasn't a direct admission of a conspiracy, but enough to cast doubt on her loyalty if he decided to show it to the board or use it against her later. Kevin leaned back in his chair, feeling the adrenaline give way to cold satisfaction. Lauren was wrong. She thought he was backed into a corner, with no way out, but now he had a weapon, her own words. He didn't know how far she and Derek had gone with their plan, but this recording was his first real bargaining chip. He hid the recorder in his desk drawer, locked it, and left the office, knowing that the battle was just beginning. Okay, let's write a chapter where Kevin leaks information about Derek's machinations to the press, investors begin to doubt his stepbrother, Lauren realizes that the situation is getting out of control, and Derek begins to get nervous and put pressure on her. The length will be up to 5,000 words, and I will maintain realism and logic without getting ahead of these events. We'll focus on Kevin's actions, the reaction from the press and investors, and the tension between Lauren and Derek. Let's go. This month was a turning point for Kevin Wilson. His hidden war against Lauren and Derek was gaining momentum, and he felt it was time to strike. Lauren's confession tape, where she said Derek could run the business better, was his trump card, but he decided to go further. Eavesdropping in Derek's office, surveillance by Ray Collins, and conversations with Tom Reynolds gave him enough evidence. Derek was falsifying reports, deliberately disrupting deals, and spreading rumors about Kevin's instability. Now Kevin wanted to turn the game around, not just defend, but attack. He knew that a direct confrontation with Derek on the board of directors might not work. Bill Henderson and Martha Crowe were already under their brother's influence, and Jack Taylor was hesitant. He needed an outside blow that would shake Derek's reputation and make investors doubt him. The idea came on Sunday when Kevin was sitting in the garage, listening to yet another recording from Derek's office. There was a short conversation with Bill where Derek mentioned a redistribution of funds from an old project, nothing explicit, but enough to hint at shenanigans. Kevin decided to exploit this by leaking it to the press. The first thing Kevin did was contact Emily Russell, his friend and ally at Wilson Construction. On Monday, he called her to his office after work, when Derek had already left. Emily entered, closed the door, and looked at him with concern. "Kev, you look like you're up to something," she said, sitting down opposite him. "It is," he replied, lowering his voice. "I need your help, Em. But this must remain between us." She nodded, her green eyes narrowing. "You know that I am with you. What's happening?" Kevin pulled out a folder from his desk drawer containing copies of the reports that Derek had corrected and handed it to her. "Derek is fudging the numbers. He's the one who sabotages deals to make me look weak. I want people to know about this, but not from me directly." Emily flipped through the papers, her eyebrows raised. "This is serious, Kev. If this is true, he is playing with fire. But how do you want to pull this off?" "Through the press," he said, leaning back in his chair. "There's a guy, Mike Jenkins, who works for the local newspaper, the Suburban Herald. My father was friends with him. I know him. If you give him an anonymous tip with these documents, he will dig up the rest. Investors will start asking questions, and Derek won't be able to get away." Emily thought, tapping her fingers on the table. "It's risky. If Derek realizes it's you, he won't understand," Kevin interrupted. "I will do it through third parties. Can you help?" She nodded, albeit reluctantly. "Fine. I know one courier who will deliver the package anonymously. But be careful, Kev. It's like throwing a match into dry grass." "I'm ready," he answered, feeling the adrenaline speeding up his blood. "Let's do this." The next day, Emily arranged for delivery. Kevin put together a package, copies of falsified reports, an anonymous note with the text, "Check the books of Wilson Construction. Derek Wilson is hiding losses," and several old contracts where the numbers did not add up. He did not sign anything of his own, leaving only hints. The courier, a silent guy in a gray jacket, picked up the package and took it to the editorial office of the Suburban Messenger to Mike Jenkins. Kevin knew Mike was an old-school, scoop-loving journalist with a reputation for fact-checking. It was the perfect choice. The article appeared on Thursday on the front page of the morning edition. The headline read, "Wilson Construction Scandal, Suspicions of Financial Fraud." The text was short but stinging. An anonymous source provided documents indicating possible irregularities in the company's accounting, and Derek Wilson's name was mentioned 3 times. Mike wrote about inconsistencies in old reports, hinted at questionable decisions, and ended with the question, who is really in control of Harry Wilson's legacy? No direct accusations, but enough to raise doubts. Kevin bought the newspaper in the morning, sitting in his pickup truck outside the office, and read it with a cold smile. He knew it would work. Investors, small shareholders, suppliers, clients will start calling and asking questions. Derek won't be able to shrug this off so easily. Kevin arrived at the office at 9, pretending to know nothing and waiting for a reaction. Jack Taylor, one of the board members, called first. His voice on the phone was alarmed. "Kevin, have you seen the newspaper? What the hell is wrong with Derek? This is true." Kevin feigned surprise. "Jack, I just found out. I don't know where this came from. Derek's in the office. I'll talk to him." "Talk," Jack snapped. "Investors are already calling me. If there is something unclean there, it is bad for all of us." Kevin hung up, feeling his plan starting to work. An hour later, the supplier called, then another investor. By noon, the office was buzzing with rumors, and Derek, sitting in his office, looked like he had swallowed a lemon. Kevin came to him under the pretext of discussing the article, holding a newspaper in his hands. "Did you see this?" he asked, throwing the newspaper on the table. "What's going on, Derek?" Derek looked up, his face tense, but he tried to remain cool. "Someone decided to organize a circus." "That's a lie, Kevin. I'll figure it out." "I hope so," Kevin replied, adding a hint of concern, "because investors are already on their ears. If this isn't sorted out, we're screwed." Derek nodded, but his fingers trembled slightly as he picked up the newspaper. Kevin saw it. His brother was nervous. For the first time ever, he looked unsure, and that was exactly what Kevin wanted. Lauren found out about the article by lunchtime. She was at home when her friend sent her a link to the online version of the Herald. As she read the headline, she felt her heart sink into her throat. This was not their plan. He and Derek were going to slowly erode Kevin's reputation, portray him as weak and Derek as the savior. But now the press was hitting Derek, and it could ruin everything. She immediately called him. "Derek, did you see?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What does it mean?" "This means that someone is digging under us," he barked, his coldness giving way to irritation. "Did you say something to Kevin? Does he know?" "No." Lauren squeezed the phone tighter. "I was careful. But this is getting out of control. If investors turn against you, our entire plan will fall apart." Derek fell silent, but she could hear his heavy breathing. When he spoke again, his voice was as sharp as a blade. "We need to speed up. You have to keep Kevin in line. Convince him that this is nonsense, that I can handle it. If he starts digging, we're lost. Do you understand?" "I'm trying, Derek," she snapped. "But he's not a fool." "What if it's him?" "It's not him," Derek snapped, but there was a shadow of doubt in his tone. "He's too busy with himself. Just do your part, Lauren. I'll deal with this." He hung up, leaving her in the silence of the kitchen. Lauren sank into her chair, feeling the situation slipping out of her hands. She knew Derek was under pressure, and it scared her. He had always been cold, calculating, but now he was nervous, and a nervous Derek could become unpredictable. As the evening wore on, the pressure on Derek intensified. 2 more investors called Kevin expressing concerns about the company's reputation. Kevin pretended to be alarmed, promised to find everything out, but inside he was jubilant. His leak worked. Derek and Lauren were on the edge, and he was going to push them even further. The Suburban Gazette leak about Derek's shenanigans worked better than he expected. Investors called with questions, suppliers expressed concerns, and the Wilson construction office was filled with what Emily called an atmosphere of quiet panic. Kevin continued to play his role. He looked worried but not broken, discussed the article with Derek, pretending to trust his brother, and even apologized to the board of directors for the misunderstanding. But inside he was rejoicing. His plan worked. Derek was under pressure, and Lauren began to lose her composure. Now he was waiting for their next move. For Lauren and Derek, the newspaper article was a gut punch. Their plan to slowly undermine Kevin's reputation, portray him as unstable, and remove him from management was falling apart at the seams. On the morning of the day after publication, they met at the Sunset Motel, in the same room 12, where their romance and plot began to gain momentum. The room was cold, with dim lamplight and the smell of old carpet. Lauren sat on the edge of the bed, nervously fiddling with the hem of her coat, and Derek stood at the window, looking out at the empty parking lot, his thin face tense as a taut string. "This is a disaster," Lauren said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. "Investors are calling Kevin, the council is whispering, and you said everything is under control." Derek turned sharply, his brown eyes narrowed. "It's under control, Lauren. Someone threw this dirt into the press, but they have nothing concrete. Just rumors. We can turn this against Kevin, say that he is panicking, losing clients due to his incompetence." Lauren shook her head, her blonde hair falling into her face. "You don't understand. If they start digging deeper, if Kevin starts digging, they'll find your corrections in the reports. We can't wait. We must act now." Derek clenched his fists, his fingers turning white. He hated being pushed into a corner, and this article did just that. He was used to being cold and calculating, but now he felt control slipping away. "Okay," he said finally, his voice sharp. "We are calling an emergency council meeting. Tomorrow, I'll talk to Bill and Martha and say that Kevin is not handling the crisis, that the article is the result of his mistakes. We will vote for a temporary suspension." Lauren looked at him, her eyes widening. "Tomorrow. Derek, this is too fast. We don't have enough votes." Jack is still hesitating, and Kevin is a weakling, he snapped. "He is confused, he signs everything I give. He didn't even notice the substitution in the last contract with Hartman. We'll convince Jack that I'm the only one who can save the company. Just keep him at home, convince him that this is a small thing, that he is overtired. He believes you." Lauren swallowed, feeling her stomach tighten. She knew Derek was right. Kevin trusted her, despite everything she'd done. But this article, this sudden turn of events, unsettled her. She nodded, although there was a growing feeling inside that they were walking on thin ice that was about to crack. "Fine. Tomorrow. But if that doesn't work—" "It will work," Derek snapped, stepping towards her. He grabbed her shoulders, his fingers digging into the fabric of her coat. "You will do your part, Lauren. No errors. Understood?" She nodded again, looking away. Derek let go of her, returned to the window, and began calling Bill Henderson, his voice smooth, confident, as if nothing had happened. Lauren looked at him, feeling her heart pounding. They were accelerating the plan, and she knew there was nowhere to retreat. Kevin, however, did not sit idly by. He knew that the article would cause a reaction, and he was waiting for it. Utterman received a message from Ray Collins. "Your lovebirds are meeting at the motel right now. Do you want a photo?" Kevin answered with a short yes, but his thoughts were already occupied with other things. He understood that Derek and Lauren would not wait. They would try to use the crisis to finish him off, and he was ready. By noon, Emily Russell walked into his office with the news he had been waiting for. "Kev, I just heard Derek talking to Bill on the phone in the hallway. He wants to call an emergency meeting tomorrow. Something about saving the company. Are you aware?" Kevin leaned back in his chair, hiding his smile. It was their move, and it came faster than he thought. "No, I don't know," he lied, adding a note of concern. "Tomorrow. Do they want to discuss the article?" "It's not easy to discuss," Emily said, lowering her voice. "I heard him mention temporary suspension. They're coming for you, Kev." He nodded, feigning alarm, but inside his mind was racing at double speed. An emergency meeting tomorrow meant they were panicking that his leak had hit harder than he expected, but he wasn't going to give them that chance. He had a plan not just to fight back, but to get ahead of them, using their own haste against them. "Thanks, Em," he said, getting up from the table. "I'll sort it out. Don't tell anyone, okay?" She nodded and left, and Kevin took the phone. He knew that the board of directors, Bill, Martha, and Jack, had to approve the date for the meeting, but as chairman he had the right to propose changes to the schedule. He decided to reschedule the meeting, but not just to another day, but to March 20th. It was Harry's birthday. It was a date that no one in the company could ignore, an emotional occasion that he could use to sway the board to his side. It also gave him time to gather more evidence and prepare. He called Bill Henderson first. "Bill, this is Kevin. Did you hear Derek wants a meeting tomorrow?" Bill cleared his throat, clearly not expecting the call. Yes, Kev. He said that the article needed to be discussed to reassure investors. It's urgent." "I understand," Kevin said, adding fatigue to his voice. "But tomorrow is too fast. I was thinking, maybe March 20th? It's Harry's birthday. We could honor his memory and discuss the future of the company. Let everyone cool down after this fuss." Bill paused, thinking. Kevin knew that Bill respected Harry more than anyone else on the council. That was his weak point. "Yes, that makes sense," he finally said. "I'll talk to Martha and Jack, but Derek won't be happy." "Don't let him be happy," Kevin answered with a slight smile. "The main thing is that the company survives." After hanging up, he made 2 more calls to Martha and Jack, repeating the same story. Martha agreed immediately, Jack was a little hesitant, but eventually nodded, saying Harry would approve. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Kevin received confirmation. The meeting had been rescheduled for March 20th. He got ahead of them. Derek was in his office checking his email when he heard about the transfer. Bill called him at 3:30 p.m., sounding guilty. Derek, Kevin suggested March 20th, Harry's birthday. Martha, Jack, and I agreed. It won't work tomorrow. Derek squeezed the phone so hard the plastic creaked. His face turned purple and his eyes narrowed to slits. What? He barked. It was my convocation. Why did you listen to him? He's the boss, Derek, Bill answered calmly. And the idea, everyone liked it. We can't ignore Harry. Derek hung up without saying goodbye and threw the phone on the table. His plan was falling apart, and he knew it was no accident. Kevin was playing with them, and it was driving him crazy. He immediately called Lauren. Your husband just crashed our meeting, he said, barely containing his rage. Postponed to March 20th. You said you have it under control. Lauren, sitting at the kitchen table at home, felt her heart sink. What? I didn't know, Derek. He didn't say anything. How did this happen? He called the council while we were planning tomorrow, Derek growled. Convinced them happy birthday, Harry. He knows Lauren, or he suspects. You must find out what he is up to and stop him. Now, I can't just, she started, but Derek cut her off. You are his wife. Do something or we're both lost. It's on you. He hung up, leaving Lauren in silence. She put the phone down, her hands shaking. Kevin had outsmarted them, and she didn't know how to fix it. Their plan was slipping away, and for the first time she felt like they were losing. Kevin returned home by 6 p.m., knowing he had won the round. Lauren greeted him with a tight smile, but he noticed her tense shoulders, her quick glance at the phone. He hugged her as usual and said, I think everything will work out, Laur. I decided to gather a council in March to honor my father. Good idea, right? She nodded, her voice quiet. Yes, good. He smiled, knowing she was trapped. His move gave him time, and their panic gave him the advantage. The game continued. March 20th was approaching, and with it came an emergency meeting of the Wilson Construction Board of Directors, which he himself rescheduled to gain time. Over the past month and a half, his hidden war against Lauren and Derek has reached its climax. Wiretaps, surveillance of Ray Collins, recordings of their conversations, leaks to the press, all this has given him an arsenal of evidence. He knew about their betrayal, their plan to remove him, and Derek's manipulation of the reports. Now he was about to deliver the final blow. Kevin decided to make the day more than just a board meeting. He announced that it would be a family and business event, a tribute to Harry, where relatives, company employees, investors, and key clients would gather. He rented a large hall at a local cultural center, organized catering, and even invited a small band to create an atmosphere of respect and unity. But behind this facade was his real plan, to publicly expose Lauren and Derek using all the evidence he had collected. He didn't just want to protect the company, he wanted to destroy their reputation so that they wouldn't be able to recover. Lauren and Derek, however, wasted no time either. After their attempt to call an emergency meeting on February 8th failed, they restructured their strategy. The Suburban Gazette leak shook Derek's position, but he managed to convince Bill Henderson and Martha Crow that it was a competitive slander, and Jack Taylor remained neutral. They decided to use this day as their last chance. Lauren was to give a speech publicly supporting the temporary transfer of control to Derek, presenting it as saving the company from the crisis caused by Kevin's instability. The week leading up to March 20th was a stressful one for Lauren. She sat in the living room of their home late on the evening of March 17th, when the children were already asleep and Kevin was in the office, supposedly preparing for the day. On the table in front of her lay a sheet of paper with sketches of her speech, neat handwriting, crossed out lines, words underlined twice. She rehearsed them over and over again, whispering to herself, Harry would be proud. Kevin did everything he could, but now the company needs a new leader. Derek is ready to take responsibility. Lauren felt her nerves stretched to the limit. After the leak to the press, Derek became harsh, demanding, his cold confidence replaced by irritation. He called her every day, pressed her, and demanded that she keep Kevin in line. Derek insisted that her performance be emotional but convincing. They met at a motel on March 18th to discuss details. He stood by the window, as usual, with a bottle of beer in his hand, and she sat on the bed, leafing through her speech. "You have to crush them, Lauren," he said, his voice low and harsh. "There's a tear in your eye. Your voice is trembling. Let everyone see how hard it is for you to say this. Kevin can't cope, and I'm the only way out. Bill and Martha are already on our side. Jack will give in if you play it right." Lauren nodded, but her fingers clenched the paper nervously. "What if he knows something, Derek?" He rescheduled the meeting. "He's too calm." "He doesn't know anything," Derek snapped, turning to her. "He's broken, Lauren. He signs everything I give and remains silent, even after the article. You just do your part. After your speech, I will go out and humbly take control. It's over." She wanted to believe him, but doubts gnawed at her. Kevin was too quiet, too easygoing. But it was too late to retreat. She practiced her speech one more time, looking in the motel mirror, and went home, preparing for the big day. Kevin, meanwhile, was completing his preparations. In a month and a half, he collected enough. Wiretap recordings of Derek discussing the fraud with Bill, videos from Collins showing Lauren and Derek at the motel, including them kissing and leaving the room, copies of false reports, Lauren's recording from the office saying that Derek would do a better job. He passed it all on to his old high school friend, Tony Martinez, who worked for a local IT company and helped edit the video. Tony didn't ask any questions, he just did the job. A 5-minute video where footage of the betrayal alternated with audio recordings of the conspiracy and screenshots of documents. Kevin decided to show this video during his presentation. He had previously arranged with the manager of the cultural center to install a projector and screen in the hall, under the pretext of showing the history of the company in memory of Harry. No one but Emily knew the truth. He told her about his plan on March 19th in the office when they were alone. Tomorrow I'll crush them," he said, looking into her eyes. "I have a video. Everything is treason, conspiracy, fraud. I'll show this to everyone." Emily turned pale, her hands frozen on the folder. "Kev, this is a nuclear strike. Are you sure? There will be no turning back after this." "I'm sure," he answered firmly. "They wanted to take everything from me. Now they will pay." She nodded, although she looked worried. "I'm with you, but be prepared, this will blow everything up." Kevin knew she was right. It would ruin his marriage, his relationship with Derek, maybe even his company. But he was ready. He was tired of pretending, tired of living their lies. Tomorrow it will all be over. On March 20th, the hall of the cultural center was full. By 10 in the morning, about 100 people had gathered. Wilson relatives, Wilson construction employees, investors, clients, the board of directors, Bill, Martha, Jack. The tables were covered with white tablecloths, with coffee, sandwiches, and flowers in memory of Harry. There was soft music playing in the corner, jazz, which he loved. On the big screen was a photo of Harry smiling with a hammer in his hand. Kevin was in a dark suit, with a tired but warm smile, greeting the guests. Lauren stood nearby, wearing a black dress with her hair tied up, looking elegant and mournful. Derek sat closer to the council, wearing a formal shirt, his face unreadable, but his fingers tapping lightly on the table, a sign of nerves. The event began at 10:30 with a minute's silence in memory of Harry. Kevin then stepped up to the microphone, his voice calm but firm. "Thank you for coming to honor the memory of my father. Today is not only a day of mourning, but also a day when we look to the future of Wilson Construction. I have something for you." He nodded to the technician, and the lights in the hall dimmed. Lauren, sitting in the front row, tensed slightly. She didn't know about the presentation, but decided that it was just a formality before her speech. Derek glanced at her briefly, his lips pursed. The video started on the screen. First, old photos of Harry at construction sites, his voice from an archival recording, "We don't just build houses, we build trust." The guest smiled, someone wiped a tear, but then the picture changed. The camera panned to Lauren and Derek outside the Sunset Motel, kissing in the dim light of a street lamp. The hall froze and whispers were heard. Lauren's voice from the office recording sounded over the footage. "Derek could have done a better job. You're making mistakes." Then Derek's voice from the wiretap, "He's not noticing anything. The council itself will ask me to take the wheel." Screenshots of the fake reports flashed on the screen, numbers highlighted in red, with Derek's signatures. Lauren turned pale, her hands clenching the armrests of the chair. Derek stood up, his face contorted with rage. "This is a lie. Turn it off," he shouted, but Kevin raised his hand, stopping the technician. "Sit down, Derek," he said, his voice as cold as steel. "Let everyone see who you really are." The hall erupted in whispers, and someone gasped. Bill Henderson looked at Derek with his mouth open. Martha covered her face with her hand. Jack shook his head. Investors began to look at each other and whisper about a scandal. Lauren stood up, her eyes filled with tears, but she could not say a word. Her speech, her plan had collapsed. Kevin turned to the audience, his voice becoming louder. "This is my company. My father entrusted it to me, and these two tried to steal it. Treason, conspiracy, fraud, this is their truth. I won't let them win." The video ended and the lights returned, but the silence in the room was deafening. Lauren ran out, her heels clicking on the floor. Derek stood there, clenching his fists, his gaze filled with hatred. Kevin looked at him, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He won. The hall erupted into a whisper, then a roar. Investors looked at each other, and someone started making phone calls, whispering, "Did you hear what's going on at Wilson?" Bill Henderson, Martha Crow, and Jack Taylor sat in the front row, their faces expressing a mixture of shock and confusion. Emily Russell, standing against the wall, gave Kevin a look full of support, but also alarm. She knew that this step was irreversible. Kevin came down from the podium, his heart pounding, but he held his head high. He did what he had to do, defended the company, exposed the traitors. But now another battle began, the consequences. As soon as the light in the hall returned, Kevin approached the board of directors. Bill stood up first, his bushy eyebrows meeting at the bridge of his nose. "Kevin, is this true?" he asked, his voice shaking with disbelief. "Derek and Lauren, fraud?" "It's true, Bill," Kevin replied, his tone firm but calm. "I have recordings, documents, and videos. They wanted to take away the company and frame me. I can show everything to the council if necessary." Martha raised her hand to stop him. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp. "No need. We've seen enough. But this is a scandal, Kevin. The company may not survive such a blow." "He'll survive," he said, looking into her eyes, "because I'll stay and get her out. They wanted to destroy their father's business. I won't allow this." Jack Taylor, who had been silent until now, nodded. "Harry would be proud of you, Kev." "But what about Derek? He's still on the council." "Not after today," Kevin replied. "I demand his resignation, and I want you to vote for it right now." The council looked at each other. Bill coughed, Martha sighed, but Jack was the first to say, "I'm for it." Martha nodded, and Bill, albeit reluctantly, agreed. "Okay, Kevin, he's leaving." The decision was made in 5 minutes. Derek Wilson was no longer part of Wilson Construction. Kevin knew it was just the beginning, but the first step had been taken. The guests began to leave, whispering and casting glances at him, some with respect, some with condemnation. Emily approached him when the hall was almost empty. "You did it, Kev," she said quietly. "But what next? Lauren, kids." "I'll figure it out, Em," he replied, squeezing her shoulder. "Thank you for being there." She nodded and walked away, leaving him alone. Kevin stood in the center of the room, looking at Harry's photo on the screen. "I did this for you, Dad," he thought, feeling the fatigue rolling in like a wave. But there was no time to rest. Derek didn't linger in the hall after the presentation. As soon as the video ended, he grabbed his coat and walked out the back door, ignoring Kevin's screams and the whispers of the guests. His mind was racing with rage and panic. He got into his black sedan, slamming the door so hard that the glass shook, and drove away from the cultural center. He didn't know where he was going, he just drove along the snowy roads until he stopped at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Sitting in the car, he slammed his fist on the steering wheel, his breathing heavy. Everything collapsed. His plan, his ambition, his control all destroyed by one video. He knew that Kevin was digging. He suspected him after the leak to the press, but he didn't think that his brother would go that far. The public humiliation was worse than the loss of company. Now he was an outcast, a traitor in the eyes of his family and business. Derek took out his phone and called Lauren, but she didn't answer. He dialed again, silence. His fingers trembled as he texted her. "Where are you? This is the end." He won. There was no answer. He threw the phone on the seat, leaned back, and closed his eyes. He understood that his resignation from the council was just the beginning. Investors, clients, even the police could be interested in the fraud that Kevin was talking about. His future was in jeopardy, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't know what to do. An hour later, he drove to the Sunset Motel, his and Lauren's refuge, which now seemed a mockery. He took off the same number 12, sat down on the bed, and opened a bottle of whiskey that he bought on the way. He drank, staring at the wall, until the alcohol dulled his anger. Derek knew he wouldn't give up, he would find a way to get revenge, but now he was broken. Lauren ran out of the hall without looking back. Her face burned with shame, tears flowed down her cheeks, but she didn't stop until she got to her car. She sat behind the wheel, her hands shaking as she tried to put the key in the ignition. Kevin's video, her kiss with Derek, her own voice saying that Derek was better, was like a knife in the heart. She didn't think he knew, didn't think he would dare do something like that. Her speech, her plan to announce the transfer of control, lay crumpled in her bag, now useless. She drove home, but could not bring herself to enter. Instead, she stopped at her mother's house, a few blocks from her and Kevin's home. The children were their Emma and Jake, whom she left with their grandmother. Lauren knocked on the door, and her mother, Judith, opened it and gasped when she saw her tear-stained face. "Lauren, what happened?" Judith asked, pulling her inside. Lauren fell onto the sofa, covering her face with her hands. "It's over, Mom." "Kevin." He showed the video. "Everyone knows. About me, about Derek." Judith sat down next to her, her eyes widening. "What video? What are you talking about?" Lauren told everything about the affair, about the conspiracy, about their plan to remove Kevin. The words came out through tears, her voice trembled. Judith listened in silence, her face becoming increasingly gloomy. When Lauren finished, her mother shook her head. "How could you, Lauren? Kevin is a good person." "What about the children? What's wrong with them now?" "I don't know," Lauren whispered. "I thought I was doing this for our sake, for a better future. But I ruined everything." Judith hugged her, but her voice was stern. "You should talk to Kevin. This is your marriage, your family, and you'll have to live with it." Lauren nodded, but inside she knew there was no turning back. She stayed with her mother until the evening, not answering Derek's calls. She understood that their union had collapsed, and now she had to face the consequences alone. Kevin returned home by 7 p.m. after finishing his calls with the board and investors. The hall was empty, the guests left, leaving behind silence and the smell of coffee. He convinced Bill, Martha, and Jack that the company would survive. He had already begun working with Emily on a turnaround plan. New contracts, transparent accounting, a public statement about cleaning up the ranks. Investors were alarmed, but many expressed support, especially after he showed them additional documents about Derek's machinations. The house was empty. Lauren did not return. Judith had the children. Kevin sat in the living room, looking at the family photos on the wall, him, Lauren, Emma, and Jake at a picnic 3 years ago. His victory seemed complete, but there was no joy. He protected the company, but lost his family. He knew that divorce was inevitable after such a betrayal. He could not forgive Lauren, even if part of him still loved her. The next day, March 21st, Kevin met with a lawyer to begin the divorce process. He wanted custody of the children, but was willing to compromise for their peace of mind. He called Judith and arranged to pick up Emma and Jake that evening, deciding to tell them the truth later when things had calmed down. Derek disappeared from view. Kevin had heard from Emily that he had been seen at the motel, but he was not looking for his brother. Their paths diverged forever. The company began to recover. Customers returned, investors calmed down, and the board fully supported Kevin as a leader. Towards the end of March, Kevin stood at Harry's grave in the cemetery, looking at the headstone. "I did it, Dad," he said quietly. "You would be proud." The wind blew through the trees, and Kevin felt at peace. His war was over, and although he lost a lot, he retained the main thing: his father's legacy and his honor. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.